this is kind of an amazing story. I woke up one day and the whole world knew who you were. And that was through Twitter, but who were you before you became so well known through Twitter?
I'm a cameraman for NBC News in Washington, D.C., and I have the coolest job in the world. And a lot of the people I work with have the coolest jobs in the world. And we're very lucky in that regard. We're witness to history, and history passes through my lens, and we share it with the world. And that's pretty cool. And sometimes I take it for granted a little bit, and I have to pinch myself. And so it's funny when you start sharing that with people on Twitter or other places, they kind of think it's kind of cool too.
You travel around with, I forget his name, the President of the United States.
President Bush.
Yeah.
Or any sitting president.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where are some of the places you've gone with him?
Oh, wow. I mean, I have, with presidents, secretaries of state, secretaries of defense, I have circled the globe so many times. The only continent I haven't been to is South America.
Really?
Haven't been there. I've been to Central America.
Strange.
Haven't been to South America.
Yeah. So here you are, you're a cameraman. You've been there a dozen years, is that right?
As staff, I've been there 12 years. In the building, of freelance and other capacities, 15.
15 years. And then sometime about a year and a half ago, you got into social media.
That was an interesting journey because, and it was, well, it's a very, one very specific event sort of propelled me down this path. Hurricane Katrina. We were in San Diego with President Bush, and Katrina hit, and we are motorcading back to Air Force One, and I look out our van and I see them changing the price tags on the gas price signs at the gas stations. They're not changing the cents, they're changing the dollars. In my driveway back home was a SUV with a 42-gallon gas tank. It occurred to me that I had to buy a new car. So my brother had bought a Honda Element, and it had a little iPod plug-in, and I thought it was a nice car, and I thought it had the kind of the space that I needed, and I bought one of those, better mileage, and I thought, well, this iPod plug-in thing, I convinced myself that of course I needed to buy an iPod. Get the iPod. Now what am I going to put on it? I started Googling around for content.
There's a lot of reasons to buy an iPod, but you're the only one who ever bought one because you got a new car.
Right. Well,
so
it felt
unlikely
incomplete.
Consequences to the nth degree.
It felt incomplete. I felt like the story wasn't finished with that car.
Yeah.
I get the iPod. I'm Googling around for content to put on the iPod. It's a video iPod, so I want to get some video stuff. And I found a website for the Portable Media Expo. And I started poking around there. And I started listening to some of the sessions, the conference sessions, and I was very energized. Here are these do-it-yourself people creating their own media, creating their own content. What was even more fascinating was that they were, in some cases, getting sponsorship for that content. And there was, in addition, there was this sentiment that the reason that was happening was they were dissatisfied with the offerings of traditional media. And I thought that's pretty amazing. I mean, people always talk about the media, and it's not always in the most positive light. But then to see people doing something about it, I thought, wow. As I examined the notion that there are people getting sponsorship and money for creating content, I thought, this is worth looking into more. And then you start reading things like Ad Age, and then the other half of that equation is, where is that money coming from? It's coming from a very limited advertising pie.
Yep.
And then all the economic disruption in traditional media jobs, layoffs, cutbacks, cost-cutting, belt tightening, bad contract offers, that kind of stuff, that kind of began to make sense. So it became clear to me that a person at the midpoint of my life, in a career that, while very rewarding, very interesting, was in a diminishing value proposition. I am quickly becoming a dinosaur as there's consolidation and cost-cutting. I felt the need to examine what was happening here, why it was happening, and then from there determine, is there a way to integrate this in what we do? Or do I need to figure out a B plan?
You started tweeting, you also blogged, but you became very well known as a tweeter.
Right.
And at some point, NBC discovered they had a guy who works for them who's doing one of these new media things.
Right.
How did they find out? What was their response?
There are valid and genuine concerns about speaking publicly about what I do. I cover the White House and cabinet level administration people. There are security issues. And in conversations I've had with people who are entrusted with our brand, they've kind of asked me, well, what do you think as we develop sort of guidelines for this type of online discussion? What do you think are some good guidelines? And I simply said to that question, don't be stupid, don't give away secrets, and be a good brand ambassador.
Very good.
Now, on all those ideas, you can write volumes, right?
Yeah.
But very specifically about covering a president or things like that, there's operational security issues. I can't give away those secrets that I'm entrusted with either, and I don't. And that's part of don't be stupid. The more and more I did this, the more and more I realized two things. A, people were associating me with NBC. B, those people were doing that in a very positive way. And people actually said to me, you know what, I started watching NBC News again because of you, or I started watching TV News again because of you.
Yeah.
Last week there was an earthquake that hit the Midwest states, and I was kind of trapped in the Pentagon briefing room all day. I was the pool camera there, and a couple of briefings, and I'm sitting in this very cold briefing room looking at Twitter. And I just kind of asked, hey, so what are you guys seeing with the coverage of the, coverage on Twitter of the earthquakes in the Midwest? People started sending me links to very dramatic first-person accounts of the earthquake, and tapped out a message to the executive producer of Nightly News. And she was very interested in this and told me to contact the Chicago Bureau, and I ended up shooting the screen with Twitter? the words like earthquake, just felt an aftershock of Twitter.
Wow.
Yeah, and it got folded into Kevin Tibble's Nightly News spot that aired on NBC Nightly News. And it provided a little more context. It was a small element, and it just was an indication that there was this chatter on a social media platform, and it was interesting. So
that's more than a little interesting.
Yeah.
Do you believe that there is a future to traditional media? And if you do, what role does social media play in that?
Yes, I do believe there is a role for traditional media. There are things that we do very, very well. I work with the best people in the business, and we can bring it together really fast and really well. And we can commit resources to stories. Is there some economic upheaval right now? Yeah. Are we working towards ways of increasing revenue? We have very smart people doing that as well. Whereas the social side of this stuff can be integrated, I think will be a very, very promising and beneficial way to get people involved, get people to be champions of what we do, and give them an avenue to participate with us.
Earlier today you told me a story about something that happened subsequent to my interview with Wael Abbas, the Egyptian blogger who posts videos on YouTube about Egyptian police brutality.
I was in the Middle East covering the president's visit. It was interesting that in that joint press conference with President Bush and Hosni Mubarak, I heard the president utter the word blogger. I thought, that's
and he said it right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting, because words aren't just words when you're a head of state.
No, they're not.
And you're speaking to the world. You're not just speaking at a joint press conference. And each one of those words are parsed very, very carefully. So when you are in a country that restricts speech and jails bloggers, and you say blogger, wow, that's significant.
That's a great moment. That's a great ending too.
Yeah.
Jim, thank you. Thank you very much.
Sal,
This was terrific.
As always, love talking with you.
Take care.